pregnant wife, catches millionaire husband sleeping with her best friend, now mistress, double betrayal. The night sky glittered over Manhattan's skyline, a symbol of limitless fortunes and bright possibilities. Yet inside a lavish penthouse overlooking those brilliant city lights, Rachel Thompson's reality would collapse in a single, devastating heartbeat. Her husband Jonathan Thompson, a self-made millionaire with a polished reputation, and her closest confidant, Miranda Garcia, the best friend she trusted with her innermost secrets, had violated every vow of loyalty. Stepping into that darkened bedroom, Rachel never imagined she'd witness a betrayal so profound it would split her life into a before and an after. Hearts, dreams, and trust were about to be shattered in ways none of them could ever undo. Rachel Thompson once believed she was living the ultimate Manhattan fairy tale. Born and raised in a small town in upstate New York, she had always dreamed of bigger horizons, city lights, high-rise apartments, and a glamorous lifestyle. That dream sprang to life after she met Jonathan Thompson, a rising star in the finance world. He was the classic self-made millionaire, sharp suits, sharper wit, and an aura of confidence that turned heads wherever he went. They married in a ceremony that dazzled society pages. At the swanky Waldorf Astoria, Rachel glided down the aisle in a custom lace gown, her heart brimming with love and excitement. The next day, tabloids blared headlines about the finance mogul's romantic wedding to small-town sweetheart. Jonathan, ever the charismatic figure, expressed unwavering devotion to his new bride. Rachel, in turn, believed she had found a partner who appreciated her genuine heart more than her social standing. In these early months of marriage, Rachel discovered that affluence came with both perks and pressures. She joined Jonathan at charity galas, dinners with powerful CEOs, and philanthropic luncheons that served more as networking events than heartfelt gatherings. At times, she felt like an actress in an extravagant play, unsure if her lines matched the grand stage she'd stumbled onto. Still, she tried to carve out a meaningful role in Jonathan's world. She nurtured her love of art by organizing high-profile auctions to benefit local youth programs. She learned the unspoken etiquette of social clubs, smiling through occasional snubs from jaded socialites who dismissed her as just another trophy wife. Despite such hurdles, Rachel cherished the glimpses of genuine warmth Jonathan showed, like the nights he whisked her away for a simple dinner in Chinatown, claiming it reminded him of the humble origins he'd overcome. All the while, Rachel's best friend, Miranda Garcia, stood as her anchor. They had been inseparable since college, forging a deep bond over shared heartbreaks, late-night pizzas, and ambitious plans for the future. When Rachel faced doubts about adapting to the Thompson family's opulent lifestyle, Miranda provided unwavering reassurance. Miranda was everything Rachel admired: confident, brilliant, and fiercely loyal, so it seemed. Yet, behind the glitzy penthouse walls, subtle cracks hinted that not all was perfect. Rachel noticed Jonathan's occasional late nights at the office, suspicious phone calls ending abruptly when she walked into the room, and fleeting shadows in his gaze. But love can be a formidable shield against suspicion. She convinced herself that every successful man should be busy, and that her best friend's unwavering presence only proved how blessed she was. Little did Rachel know, a merciless truth lurked just beyond the horizon, one that would shatter her illusions of love, trust, and the best friendship she had ever known. Miranda Garcia was the kind of woman who turned heads effortlessly. She carried herself with a natural grace, accentuated by a tall frame and sleek black hair that cascaded down her back. Raised in a middle-class household, Miranda had clawed her way through college by juggling part-time jobs and scholarships. Her ambition rivaled that of any Ivy League graduate, and her intelligence shone just as brightly. Rachel met Miranda on their first day at Hudson University. They were assigned as roommates in a cramped dorm, forced to share bunk beds and endure questionable cafeteria food. Their backgrounds were different. Rachel grew up in a cozy, rural environment, whereas Miranda had experienced a more suburban lifestyle, but they bonded over a shared hunger for success and an aversion to the campus's petty drama. Miranda studied communications and marketing, soon distinguishing herself with top grades and a knack for persuasive speech. She had a flair for turning even the most casual conversation into a stepping stone for networking. Rachel admired her friend's tenacity. No matter how many obstacles life threw her way, Miranda tackled them with unapologetic boldness. After graduation, they kept close as they both moved to Manhattan. Miranda landed a job in public relations, quickly ascending the corporate ladder at a boutique PR firm. Meanwhile, Rachel's path diverged when she met Jonathan. She left behind her own budding career in art curation to support her husband's demanding schedule. Despite the shift, Miranda and Rachel remained inseparable. They met for weekly brunches in Soho, attended yoga classes together, and occasionally confided in each other about personal insecurities. While Rachel sometimes felt overshadowed by her new lifestyle, Miranda seemed genuinely supportive. She listened intently to Rachel's worries about high society pressures and validated her feelings whenever Jonathan's world felt stifling. Beyond her unwavering support, Miranda also possessed an edge that both intrigued and unsettled Rachel. She was fierce in pursuit of her goals, some might say ruthless. But Rachel never questioned Miranda's loyalty. She'd seen her friend defend her countless times against mean-spirited gossip or cynical acquaintances who doubted Rachel's place beside a millionaire husband. As time flowed, Miranda became something of an unofficial advisor to Rachel. She suggested ways to navigate social events with confidence, reminded Rachel to maintain her own identity, and even connected her with philanthropic contacts that complemented Jonathan's circle. Rachel believed that having Miranda in her corner was proof positive that she'd never lose her sense of self. If anything, she felt grateful that her best friend understood the complexities of her new life. Unbeknownst to Rachel, Miranda's ambitions stretched further than any PR career or social network expansion. Beneath the polished exterior and comforting friendship, she carried secrets that would set the stage for an emotional explosion. And the match that would ignite that fuse was creeping ever closer, threatening to destroy everything Rachel thought she knew. The shifting tides in Jonathan's behavior began subtly. At first, it was small things, text messages he kept hidden, whispered phone calls. He excused himself to take in the other room. Rachel, trained by love to trust, brushed these off as typical of someone in the high-stakes financial sector. If he didn't want to reveal deal details, perhaps it was simply to protect her from the stress or legal constraints. She told herself as much whenever anxiety crept in. Then came the nights he didn't come home until well past midnight. He claimed emergency meetings with clients on a European time zone. Yet even that might have been believable. Jonathan was known to handle global investments, so it seemed plausible. But Rachel couldn't ignore how disheveled he sometimes appeared, tie loose, hair askew, the faint whiff of perfume that wasn't hers. One evening, she dared to question him. "You smell different," she said gently, searching his eyes for honesty. A flicker of guilt flashed in those dark irises, but he masked it with a disarming grin. "A new cologne from a meeting," he insisted. "Maybe it's the scent in the taxi." His explanation felt flimsy, but Rachel didn't press. She hated the thought of turning into a suspicious wife. While Jonathan's distance grew, ironically, Miranda's presence increased. She dropped by the penthouse more often. Sometimes she brought dinner or a new bottle of wine she'd discovered. She'd lounge in the living room with Rachel, asking pointed questions about how things were going. "Is everything okay with you two? You seem stressed," she'd remark, her tone laced with genuine concern. Rachel confided in her friend about the late nights, the uncertain hush that fell between her and Jonathan. "Maybe he's feeling pressured," Miranda would suggest, gently patting Rachel's hand. "He's a man with huge responsibilities. These guys get so wrapped up in their world, they forget how it looks from the outside." She urged Rachel to be patient, to remain calm and supportive. Confrontation might push him away, Miranda warned. As the stress piled on, Rachel found herself more reliant on Miranda's advice. Her best friend's unwavering encouragement reassured her that she wasn't overreacting. After all, Miranda had no reason to mislead her, so Rachel thought. She truly believed Miranda was her champion, the protective force who'd stand by her no matter what storms brewed. Yet, in moments of quiet reflection, Rachel felt a pang of unease. She noticed how her friend sometimes vanished after Jonathan's calls, or how she seemed to know more than she let on about Jonathan's business. She dismissed those thoughts as paranoia. She had no reason to suspect the two people she loved most, her husband and her best friend, would conspire to betray her. The very idea was unthinkable. In the days to come, the unthinkable would become undeniable. For hidden behind the forced smiles and hasty excuses was a betrayal brewing, one that neither Jonathan nor Miranda intended for Rachel to discover, at least not until they had locked her out of the life she'd built. But fate had other plans, setting the stage for a heartbreak so deep it would eclipse any illusions of loyalty left in Rachel's heart. Rachel always trusted her gut, but ever since stepping into her new life, she found herself second-guessing those instincts, lulled by the veneer of wealth and camaraderie. Still, certain moments pricked her subconscious. A hush fell over the room whenever she entered, and Jonathan quickly hung up a call. Miranda, upon seeing Rachel approach a conversation between them, abruptly changed the subject to trivial gossip. Or that afternoon, when a bouquet of expensive orchids arrived at the penthouse with no note, Jonathan insisted they were from a business associate. Miranda, for no reason Rachel could deduce, grew uneasy at the sight of them. Late at night, Rachel sometimes woke to find Jonathan missing from their bed, only to discover him in the living room, speaking softly on the phone. He'd claim restlessness, flipping through financial portfolios on his laptop. She'd sense tension in his posture, a glimmer of annoyance that she'd disturbed him. No matter his rationales, a persistent hollowness in her chest grew. Increasingly, she noticed Miranda's shift, too. Her friend sometimes appeared anxious around Jonathan, stealing guarded glances as though tracking his every reaction. Then, in a split second, she'd revert to the supportive BFF persona, smiling widely, offering Rachel comforting hugs, if she even hinted at marital stress. The more contradictory behaviors Miranda displayed, the more they fed Rachel's suspicion that something was off. One weekend, an unexpected scenario amplified her doubts. Jonathan claimed he was away in D.C. for a corporate conference, but his key liaison, whom Rachel had once dined with, posted pictures on social media clearly set in Los Angeles. There was no mention of Jonathan traveling with him. Rachel confronted Jonathan gently over FaceTime. He flashed irritation. "Plans changed last minute," he snapped. "Why are you prying? You know how fluid deals can be." Miranda, discovering Rachel's concerns that Monday, quickly soothed her. "Jonathan's a busy man. Maybe he's handling a sensitive takeover or something hush-hush," she reasoned, brushing aside the odd details. "Don't let social media posts rile you up." Rachel wanted to believe that. She had no solid proof, just a swirl of inconsistencies. But a wise voice inside her whispered that ignoring so many signs would be foolish. She decided to quietly start paying closer attention. She reviewed credit card statements, noticing unexplained charges from luxury spas and restaurants in Manhattan. She asked gentle questions around Jonathan's office staff, receiving polite but tight-lipped responses. The more she dug, the more anxious she became, as if an invisible noose of betrayal was tightening. Miranda's unwavering calm didn't help, or perhaps it was too unwavering. The best friend who once championed total honesty seemed adept at redirecting or deflecting. Rachel tried to push away paranoid thoughts. Perhaps Miranda was just trying to help. Perhaps Jonathan's secrets were simply career-related. Yet, the more she tried to rationalize, the deeper her sense of dread sank. A storm was gathering, and she stood at its epicenter, bracing for an impact that would tear her life asunder. No betrayal is discovered at a convenient time, and Rachel's heartbreak would prove no exception. One crisp autumn morning, Jonathan departed for what he called a pivotal client meeting in Montreal. She kissed him goodbye, ignoring the flutter of unease in her stomach. He had promised to return the following week, leaving her to handle the upcoming charity gala for children's art programs, an event she had poured her heart into organizing. 2 days later, she stood in the nearly finalized art exhibit space, double-checking lighting and display placements. An urgent phone call from the lighting technician demanded her immediate attention back at the penthouse. A missing set of cables they insisted might be in her personal supply trunk. Sighing, Rachel hailed a cab, planning a quick run to retrieve the cables. Inside the penthouse foyer, everything felt oddly still. She expected the hush, no staff that day, and Jonathan was out of town. But something intangible made her heart race. She walked through the living area, heading toward the back storage closet. As she passed the master bedroom hallway, muffled sounds pricked her ears, hushed voices, a stifled laugh, one unmistakably female. Her pulse thundered. Could Jonathan have returned early? He was supposed to be in Montreal. The second voice, female and heartbreakingly familiar, sent ice flooding her veins. Miranda? Step by step, dread coiled in her chest. She inched closer to the closed bedroom door, each footfall heavy with apprehension. Pressing an ear to the door, Rachel heard a rustle of sheets, a soft moan, the distinct timbre of Jonathan's voice. She clutched at the doorknob with trembling fingers. A single twist, and the door cracked open. The sight that met her eyes shattered everything. Jonathan, shirtless, tangled with a woman whose face was momentarily hidden by tousled hair, but the silhouette was unmistakable. Then the woman turned, and Rachel's world collapsed into an implosion of betrayal. Miranda Garcia, her best friend, intimately wrapped in Jonathan's arms. Rachel's breath caught in her throat, shock pulsing through every nerve. She froze, a silent statue in the doorway, time distorted, stretching painfully. Inside the room, Miranda's eyes flicked open, landing on Rachel. Horror dawned on her face. She jerked away from Jonathan, who spun around, equally stunned. For a heartbeat, all three stood in a tragic tableau. Then Rachel found her voice raw, trembling with fury and heartbreak. "How could you?" she rasped. No tears came yet, only a searing sense of betrayal that made her chest feel as if it might implode. Her gaze darted between them, searching for any explanation, any sign of an elaborate misunderstanding. But the truth lay bare in disheveled sheets. Miranda scrambled for clothes, stammering nonsense. Jonathan opened his mouth, likely to spout some excuse. But Rachel spun on her heel, adrenaline surging, and fled the bedroom. She needed to escape before the pain devoured her. The single phrase echoing in her mind, "My husband, my best friend, how dare they?" And as she sprinted out, heartbreak clenched her heart like a vice, ushering in a new era of unimaginable devastation. Rachel barely remembered how she reached the elevator. Her limbs moved on autopilot, her mind swirling with images she couldn't unsee. Jonathan's face contorted with panic, Miranda's lips parted in guilt. The elevator's reflective walls offered no solace, only magnifying her tear-stricken expression. Once in the lobby, she stumbled outside, ignoring the doorman's concerned greeting. She flagged the first taxi she saw, collapsing into the back seat with a strangled sob. "Where to, miss?" the driver asked gently, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. Rachel couldn't muster a location. Home was defiled by treachery, and she had nowhere else in mind. After a broken moment, she whispered an address, one that belonged to her longtime college friend, Olivia Brooks, who lived across town. Olivia was among the few people Rachel trusted, someone outside the Jonathan and Miranda sphere. She arrived in a daze, climbing the stoop to Olivia's modest apartment. At the knock, Olivia answered in pajamas, confusion etched on her face. Without words, Rachel burst into sobs. Olivia ushered her inside, arms wrapping comfortingly. The next hours became a blur of trembling confessions, tears streaming as Rachel recounted the horrifying discovery. Olivia listened, stunned, occasionally cursing Jonathan and Miranda under her breath. By evening, the raw ache had dulled to a throbbing numbness. Rachel had no appetite, though Olivia tried coaxing her with soup. She stared vacantly at the city lights beyond the apartment window. The phone buzzed incessantly, calls from Jonathan, even a few from Miranda. Each ring seemed to slice deeper into her soul. She turned off the phone, shutting out their attempts to spin the situation or beg for forgiveness. She needed space. She needed time to process how her husband and best friend had carried on an affair under her nose. The puzzle pieces of suspicious behavior fell into place with cruel clarity. The late nights, the inside jokes, Miranda's unwavering push for Rachel to trust Jonathan. It wasn't just a passing fling, it was a betrayal so layered that Rachel felt physically ill at the magnitude of it. Olivia offered to let Rachel stay indefinitely, but Rachel worried about burdening her friend. She considered hotels, but with the scandal that might soon erupt, any public setting felt risky. She also thought about returning to her family in upstate New York, yet that would mean confronting humiliating questions from everyone. For now, she curled up on Olivia's couch, face puffy and eyes red, trying to stave off panic at the thought that her once stable life had crumbled overnight. Sleep offered no reprieve. Nightmares replayed the scene, Miranda's startled face, Jonathan's half-naked form. Rachel woke repeatedly, tears soaking the pillow, each time wishing the images were illusions. But reality was harsher. Her husband was unfaithful, and the person she once called sister of the heart was the other woman. The next day's dawn found Rachel no closer to understanding how to move forward, only certain that she could never trust them again. Morning light found Rachel still curled on Olivia's couch, eyes swollen from a sleepless night. The reality of the double betrayal weighed on her chest like a boulder. She braced herself to check her phone, which had been turned off all night. Powering it on, a flood of messages rolled in. Jonathan had texted and called repeatedly, each message more desperate than the last. Some were pleas for her to come home and talk, others were hurried apologies, and a few even shifted blame, as if her distant behavior had somehow contributed. Miranda's messages, fewer but no less painful, apologized in rambling paragraphs, claiming it was an accident or a moment of weakness. Reading them turned Rachel's stomach. She turned the phone off again, repulsed. Olivia insisted Rachel take at least a few days off from the demands of social events. The art gala Rachel had helped plan was imminent, but she couldn't imagine facing the public or continuing normal duties. A meltdown was inevitable if she had to plaster on a smile. She texted Paula, her co-worker at the charity, vaguely citing a family emergency and requesting coverage for the event. Paula, worried, agreed to handle it. The second day after the betrayal, Jonathan attempted a new tactic. He sent Flowers lavish orchids that nearly filled Olivia's small living room. The attached note claimed he was a fool, that he loved Rachel and couldn't picture life without her. Rachel scoffed, discarding the note in the trash. No grand bouquet could mend the memory of his body entwined with Miranda's. By the third day, the media stirred. Gossip columns noted that Rachel had mysteriously vanished from Jonathan's side. A photograph circulated showing Jonathan leaving his penthouse looking disheveled, fueling speculation about marital discord. So far, no direct mention of Miranda emerged, but Rachel dreaded the moment the press discovered the affair. Jonathan was a high-profile figure, and scandals like these rarely remained quiet for long. Meanwhile, a swirl of conflicting emotions raged inside Rachel. She still felt love for the husband she once knew, gentle, supportive, charismatic. She yearned for an explanation that would magically absolve them both, though she knew it was impossible. Simultaneously, a fiery hatred flared for the man who had brazenly lied to her, humiliating her so deeply. Worse was the sense of betrayal from Miranda, the woman she had considered a sister. That cut deeper than any heartbreak from Jonathan. She had shared secrets, dreams, vulnerabilities with Miranda. How could her friend betray her trust so brazenly? Olivia urged her to consider legal counsel. He's a millionaire, Raksh. You can't just trust that he'll do right by you. The mention of divorce sliced through Rachel's chest like a blade. She realized she wasn't prepared to face the legal complexities, the dismantling of their marriage, or the potential backlash from powerful associates who might side with Jonathan. But she also knew staying silent would only further degrade her self-worth. She stared out the window at the passing city traffic, lost in thought. A crossroads loomed, fight for her marriage or sever it. Either path promised more heartbreak. For now, she only knew one truth. She wouldn't be returning to Jonathan's penthouse. Not until she found a shred of clarity in this emotional storm. Rachel managed to maintain her distance for nearly a week before Jonathan found a way to corner her. She left Olivia's apartment one afternoon to attend a crucial meeting at Bright Futures regarding an art therapy initiative. Emerging from the building's revolving doors, she froze upon spotting Jonathan leaning against a sleek black sedan parked across the street. Immediately her pulse sped up, though she steadied herself. He looked haggard, dark circles beneath his eyes, hair unkempt. As soon as he saw her, he crossed the street, ignoring honking cars. She braced for an unpleasant scene, glancing around warily paparazzi might lurk, but she saw no obvious cameras. "Rachel," he said, breath catching in his throat, "we need to talk." She clenched her jaw, turning to walk away. "I have nothing to say to you." He quickened his pace to keep up, voice low and urgent. "Please, 5 minutes. I'm begging you." The desperation in his tone tugged at the corner of her anger. Reluctantly, she led him around the corner to a quieter side street. Her arms folded defensively. "Speak." He inhaled shakily. "I'm so sorry. What you saw, I can't justify it. I messed up badly. It was never about love or even real desire. Miranda manipulated me." Rachel's eyebrows shot up, rage igniting. "Are you blaming her? She's not innocent, but you made your choice. Don't insult me with excuses." Jonathan ran a trembling hand through his hair. "It wasn't an affair in the sense you think. It's complicated." He closed his eyes. "I got pulled into this. It started as a misunderstanding. She came on to me, and I was lonely. You seemed distant, busy with your charities, always suspecting me. I felt unappreciated." "Unappreciated?" Rachel spat. "You're the self-proclaimed multi-millionaire I dropped everything to support, and you felt unappreciated." He grimaced, tears gathering in his eyes. I know. It's indefensible. But I love you. I want to fix this. I'll do counseling, sign any contract you want. Just please, come home. Part of Rachel's heart twisted, recalling how deeply she'd loved him. But the memory of him wrapped in Miranda's arms was a fresh wound. Her voice wavered. Your pleas mean nothing. You betrayed me with my best friend, Jonathan. The one person who was like a sister to me. That's not a mistake. It's a pattern of deception. He reached for her hand. She snatched it away. Rachel, I'll do anything to make it right. Let me prove it. A swirl of emotions threatened to collapse her composure. She hardened her gaze, stepping backward. I'm not sure there's anything left to fix. We're done, at least for now. Jonathan's face fell, his hope flickering out. He wanted to argue further, but she pivoted and walked away, fighting tears. She could sense his agony behind her, but refused to turn back. If he truly wanted redemption, he would need to show more than words. Meanwhile, her shattered heart ached, a storm of sadness and anger surging within. She wondered if he'd chase after Miranda again. If anything, the conversation only left her more uncertain, haunted by how swiftly a life built on supposed love could disintegrate under the weight of betrayal. Days after that brief encounter with Jonathan, Rachel realized she had scarcely confronted Miranda's role in the betrayal. The woman who once championed her every success, who listened to her fears about marriage, had become the center of her heartbreak. Part of Rachel yearned to unleash fury upon Miranda, to demand an explanation for how she could so callously destroy their bond. Another part dreaded hearing the same worthless excuses Jonathan spewed. Still, she needed closure. She arranged a meeting in a public cafe, selecting a quiet corner table where emotions might be contained. The tension was excruciating as she awaited Miranda's arrival. Would she show up alone or run away from accountability? Miranda walked in, face pale, eyes darting with shame. She wore a simple black coat over a fitted dress, hair pulled tight in a bun, a stark contrast to her usual breezy style. Approaching the table, she slid into a seat, not daring to meet Rachel's gaze. For a charged moment, they sat in silence. Rachel studied Miranda, the friend she once considered a sister, noticing the slight tremor in her hands. Finally, Rachel spoke, voice steely. Why? Miranda swallowed hard, clasping her fingers together. I can't even begin to express how sorry I am. It wasn't supposed to happen. Jonathan and I. It started as a drunken mistake at a corporate after-party. Then She paused, blinking back tears. He felt neglected. I felt overshadowed by everything. It spiraled, but I never planned to keep it going. It just did. Rachel's breath caught, anger flaring. Neglected? Overshadowed? That's your excuse for crawling into bed with my husband? Miranda flinched. I know. It's vile. I was insecure, my job, my love life. I envied your marriage, your new life. It twisted me inside. I convinced myself Jonathan cared about me too. But it was never real. Rachel's nails dug into her palm. Then why continue? Why not stop the moment you realized it was a betrayal of everything we shared? Tears rolled down Miranda's cheeks. I was weak, addicted to the thrill, the attention. I didn't know how to back out without losing your friendship or risking Jonathan exposing me. It's no excuse, I know, she sniffed. I hate myself for it. Quiet fury warred with heartbreak inside Rachel. She wanted to scream, lash out, but a weary sadness hollowed her voice. You destroyed me, Miranda. Everything we had, our years of trust. You not only betrayed me, but also stood by watching me spiral in doubt. Miranda wiped her eyes, voice trembling. If there's any chance, any path to forgiveness, I'll do whatever it takes. Rachel's gaze hardened. Forgiveness? This isn't a petty dispute. You conspired with my husband behind my back. You've demolished the bedrock of trust I placed in you for a decade. Do you even realize the magnitude? Miranda bowed her head, tears splashing onto the table. For a moment, Rachel felt the pang of sympathy for her once beloved friend, but it was fleeting. The betrayal was too deep, the wound too raw. She stood abruptly, ignoring curious stares from other patrons. "We're done, Miranda. I can't have you in my life." Miranda whispered a broken "I'm sorry" as Rachel turned on her heel, footsteps echoing with finality. Walking away, Rachel felt an odd numbness. She had chosen to cut ties with the friend who once meant everything. Any illusions of reconciliation or a gentle salvage of their friendship were lost. The heartbreak was irreparable, and in that moment, Rachel realized she had to stand on her own, forging a path forward, minus the two people who once formed the closest circle of her world. Rachel's heartbreak evolved into grim determination. She recognized that a messy separation from Jonathan was inevitable. The betrayal was too severe for half measures or temporary solutions. Encouraged by Olivia, she consulted a respected divorce attorney, Grace Whitfield, known for handling high-profile cases discreetly. Grace, a poised woman in her 40s, listened intently as Rachel laid out the details: Jonathan's wealth, the prenuptial agreement she had naively signed without thorough review, and the humiliating affair with Miranda. Her professional demeanor offered no trace of judgment, only a systematic approach to safeguarding Rachel's interests. "First," Grace began, "we need to assess the prenup's terms. Is there an infidelity clause? Did Jonathan's behavior breach any conditions? We'll also want to examine marital assets, potential property entitlements. With his high net worth, negotiations can be tricky. But your moral standing is strong. There's a clear betrayal." Rachel sat, spine rigid. "I never wanted to fight over money," she admitted. "He built his empire. But after what he did, I don't trust him to be fair unless the law forces his hand." Grace nodded sympathetically. "Understandable. We'll proceed carefully. My biggest piece of advice: don't communicate with him without legal counsel present, especially about settlement terms. Keep emotional conversations separate." Despite her heartbreak, Rachel appreciated the clarity. She couldn't float in limbo forever, battered by false apologies or manipulations from Jonathan. She also fretted about how the scandal might explode in the media, tainting her charitable work. Grace agreed to manage any PR angles with caution, ensuring Rachel's privacy was as protected as possible. In the weeks following their initial meeting, Grace's team dug into the prenup and discovered it was surprisingly lenient. Jonathan had insisted that should the marriage end due to his fault, like an affair, Rachel would be entitled to a generous settlement. He likely never expected to be the unfaithful party. This gave Rachel a stronger position than she'd anticipated. News of the impending divorce soon trickled through Manhattan's rumor mill. Speculation soared. Did Jonathan's rumored affair with some unnamed woman catalyze the split? Paparazzi sometimes swarmed near Olivia's apartment, vying for a shot of Rachel. She managed to stay out of public eye for the most part, refusing any interviews. The media had yet to connect Miranda's name to the scandal, though Rachel suspected it was only a matter of time. Jonathan attempted to meet with her multiple times, but Grace interceded, warning him to communicate only through her office. Late-night texts from him still pinged Rachel's phone, lamenting regrets, threatening to fight for them, or painting Miranda as a manipulative temptress. Each message sent Rachel's anger flaring anew, though she remained silent. She was forging a new path, guided by a bruised but resolute sense of self. The heartbreak still pulsed, raw at night when memories threatened to overtake her. Yet each day, she took one step further from the wreckage Jonathan and Miranda left behind, clinging to the faint hope that from the ashes of betrayal, She could rebuild a life anchored by her own worth. The precarious balance of secrecy unraveled on a crisp December morning. A major gossip outlet published an exclusive with the headline, "Millionaire Jonathan Thompson's secret affair with wife's best friend exposed." The article included unsourced quotes, references to a meltdown at the penthouse, and speculation that Jonathan's mistress was none other than Miranda Garcia, a rising PR professional. Rachel awoke to her phone, buzzing non-stop calls from acquaintances, texts from concerned friends, even a timid message from her mother. She stared at the article in disbelief, her shame and fury intensifying. Photos accompanied the piece, paparazzi shots of Miranda entering the penthouse on nights. Jonathan claimed to be away, an image of Jonathan's anxious expression as he stepped out of an SUV near Miranda's building. The tabloid had woven the entire narrative, painting Rachel as the devastated spouse. Panic threatened to swallow her. She dreaded the onslaught of pitying stares or, worse, malicious gossip that would swirl in high society. But Olivia, steadfast as always, rallied with a plan. She insisted Rachel release a concise statement through Grace's legal office, confirming the separation without revealing personal details. Grace agreed, drafting a calm, precise note that read, "Miss S. Rachel Thompson confirms that she is in the process of ending her marriage to Jonathan Thompson following irreconcilable differences and a breach of trust. She requests privacy as she proceeds with legal counsel." The statement circulated quickly, overshadowed by tabloid sensationalism. Meanwhile, Miranda's name trended on social media, her PR firm caught in a tempest. Anonymous insiders spilled that she'd been terminated from a recent contract. In a twisted sense of satisfaction, Rachel felt a surge of relief. Miranda was facing consequences for the betrayal. Still, she couldn't help but feel sorrow for how everything had disintegrated so publicly. Jonathan, evidently scrambling for damage control, gave an ill-advised interview with a local business magazine. He insisted that rumors of an extended affair are overblown, suggesting that while a mistake occurred, it was not as malicious as portrayed. He even cast doubt on Miranda's intentions, painting himself as a victim of seduction. The half-confession only fueled more speculation, driving a deeper wedge between him and the city's sympathy. Rachel struggled to keep her composure each time the scandal reared its ugly head. She forced herself to focus on philanthropic commitments, ignoring sidelong glances from new acquaintances uncertain how to approach the scandalized ex-wife. She visited the children's art programs she loved, determined not to let shame derail her mission. The kids mercifully had no interest in tabloids. Their innocent smiles and cheerful finger paint masterpieces grounded her in a sense of real meaning, far from the superficial swirl of gossip. Through it all, she clung to the knowledge that the divorce process was in motion. Grace reported progress in negotiations. Despite the public fiasco, Jonathan seemed inclined to settle quickly, likely to avoid more humiliating details emerging in court. For Rachel, the next steps felt uncertain, but at least she saw a glimmer of light beyond the scandal's shadow. Perhaps, she thought, once the dust settled, she could rebuild a life untainted by Jonathan's broken promises. It would take time, tears, and enormous resolve, but she was determined to reclaim her future. Weeks drifted by, carrying winter's chill deeper into Manhattan. Rachel spent them navigating the final stages of her divorce settlement with Jonathan. According to Grace, the financial agreement took shape in Rachel's favor, largely due to a prenuptial clause triggered by Jonathan's infidelity. Rachel had never intended to profit from her heartbreak, but she also understood the practicality of ensuring her independence. For all his failings, Jonathan seemed motivated to settle quickly, likely to stanch the media bleeding. He avoided public confrontations, retreating into a quiet PR strategy orchestrated by top crisis managers. They spun a narrative of private negotiations, deflecting direct blame. Meanwhile, Miranda vanished from the social scene. Some rumors placed her in Los Angeles, job hunting for a fresh start. Rachel tried not to dwell on it. She had no desire to track Miranda's fate. In quieter moments, Rachel reflected on her next steps. Freed from the illusions of her marriage, she recognized how she had neglected her own aspirations. She dusted off old sketches, reacquainting herself with the passion for art curation that once fueled her. She considered launching a small gallery or a creative consultancy, using some of the settlement funds to jumpstart a new venture. The idea lit a spark of excitement in a heart battered by betrayal. Therapy sessions became a source of solace. Encouraged by Olivia, Rachel found a compassionate therapist who guided her through the emotional aftermath of double betrayal. The therapist's office became a safe space for tears, confessions, and gradual acceptance. She learned to release the guilt that perhaps she wasn't enough for Jonathan, or that she should have foreseen Miranda's treachery. Over time, she discovered the capacity to forgive herself for trusting those who proved unworthy. One crisp Sunday, as she strolled through Central Park with Olivia, a sense of renewal flickered. The sun broke through winter clouds, glinting off patches of snow, a subdued metaphor for hope shining in the bleakness. She laughed for the first time in weeks, a genuine, unburdened laugh that startled even her. Olivia, noticing, squeezed her arm, beaming. "You're going to be okay," her friend said softly, and for the first time, Rachel believed it. Later that evening, back at Olivia's apartment, Rachel read the final draft of the divorce settlement. A swirl of emotions welled relief, sadness for the good times that once were, and an odd gratitude that she would soon close this painful chapter. She recalled the young woman she had been when she first fell for Jonathan, starry-eyed, naive, brimming with romantic ideals. She wasn't that girl anymore, and perhaps that was a necessary evolution. By the next day, Grace confirmed a date for the final hearing, an amicable, behind closed doors proceeding to finalize terms. Rachel exhaled, bracing herself for the official dissolution of a marriage she once believed would last forever. While heartbreak lingered, she also felt an undercurrent of strength. She'd survived unimaginable betrayal, gleaned hard lessons about trust, and discovered an inner resilience that would guide her into a future shaped by her own vision. The path to healing was far from over, but she could sense the worst storms were passing. The horizon, though uncertain, beckoned her forward. On the morning of the divorce hearing, Manhattan's sky hung low with grey clouds, threatening rain. Rachel, dressed in a simple black dress, pearls at her neck, a subdued reflection of her status, no longer a starry-eyed trophy wife, but a woman determined to face closure with dignity. Olivia accompanied her, offering moral support. The private courtroom setting was surprisingly small, with a single judge presiding behind a wooden bench. Jonathan arrived with his attorney, sporting a tailored suit and a tired expression. He offered a faint nod to Rachel, who acknowledged it with a curt dip of her head. There was no need for pretense or illusions anymore. Grace guided Rachel through the proceedings, ensuring each clause of the settlement was recognized. The entire hearing lasted barely 30 minutes. The judge confirmed that Jonathan's documented infidelity triggered certain provisions in the prenuptial, awarding Rachel a fair financial sum and disclaiming any future spousal claims. No children were involved, so custody battles did not apply. At the end, the judge stated simply, "Your divorce is granted." A wave of emotions flooded Rachel's sadness for what might have been, relief that the official bond with a cheating partner was severed, and a pang of finality that closed an entire chapter of her life. She caught a glimpse of Jonathan's eyes across the room. He looked as though he wanted to speak, perhaps to utter one last apology. But Grace hurriedly led Rachel out, mindful of avoiding any more emotional entanglements. Outside, the first droplets of rain peppered the pavement. Olivia shielded Rachel with an umbrella, guiding her to the waiting taxi. Once inside, Rachel exhaled a tremulous breath. "It's done," she whispered, voice tinged with disbelief. "Just like that, I'm not Miss S. Thompson anymore." Olivia squeezed her hand. "Maybe you never truly were. The woman you are can finally stand on her own." Rachel let the words sink in, heart heavy, yet oddly light. She'd arrived in the city years ago, hoping to become part of something bigger, first Jonathan's world, then the illusions of a storybook marriage. Now, ironically, she was forging a new identity, not Jonathan's wife, not Miranda's best friend, but simply Rachel, an independent woman with uncharted potential. That night, alone in Olivia's apartment, Rachel rummaged through old wedding photos. She paused on one, a radiant bride in white, beaming as Jonathan slipped a ring on her finger. Tears slipped down her cheeks, a mourning for the innocence lost. She gently placed the photos in a box, sealing them away. She wasn't discarding her history, only acknowledging it was done. A small voice inside her whispered of fresh starts. She thought of launching her dream gallery or continuing her philanthropic endeavors free from the Thompson name. She resolved to begin searching for a studio space soon. She might even plan a small exhibition featuring artists from underprivileged backgrounds. The glimmer of purpose lit her mind, overshadowing the gloom of heartbreak. In time, she would find new friendships, trust new people, maybe even risk love again. For now, she let herself feel the grief and the slight liberation that accompanied being truly alone. This final hurdle, the official dissolution, made way for the slow process of healing, a path that would see her stepping into tomorrow with a quiet determination to rebuild her life on her own terms. The weeks following her finalized divorce marked a transformative period for Rachel. Freed from the constraints of a scandal-ridden marriage, she poured energy into a vision she'd long deferred. With settlement funds carefully allocated, she secured a modest but promising studio space in the Lower East Side, a raw, brick-walled loft brimming with creative potential. Tapping into her old network of fellow art enthusiasts, she curated a small, vibrant collection showcasing emerging talents. Her passion revived, selecting pieces, hosting intimate previews, forging connections with collectors who appreciated more than just brand-name artists. This nascent gallery, labeled New Horizons, symbolized her rebirth from victim to visionary. Though the scandal still cropped up in certain gossip circles, Rachel no longer cowered. She carried herself with quiet grace. If acquaintances gossiped about her divorce or whispered about Miranda's rumored downfall, she merely offered a calm statement that she'd moved on. She refused to let bitterness define her. Instead, she used the public's fleeting interest to subtly highlight her new philanthropic mission, part of every sale at her gallery supported an art therapy program for inner-city youths. Support sprouted from unexpected corners. A few women in Manhattan's upper crust, themselves survivors of marital betrayals, reached out to cheer her on. Some even commissioned pieces to help support her new cause. Rachel found a budding camaraderie among these women, forging fresh friendships built on mutual empathy rather than superficial niceties. Meanwhile, loyal allies like Olivia and Paula stood by, cheering every milestone. One breezy spring afternoon, as she rearranged canvases in her gallery, a messenger arrived delivering an envelope. Inside lay an invitation to a posh charity ball, a cause Jonathan's firm once championed. Scrawled on the invite was a note: "We'd be honored if you attend as a philanthropic leader." Sincerely, the organizing committee. The notion that she was recognized for her own philanthropic endeavors, independent of Jonathan's shadow, warmed her heart. She set the invitation aside, pondering whether she was ready to re-enter that swirl of high society on her own merits. In a reflective moment, she realized that in forging her new identity, she had proven something essential. Heartbreak can be devastating, but it doesn't have to define one's destiny. She had survived the double betrayal of the two people she loved most, and discovered that beyond betrayal lies a field of possibilities for growth, independence, and rediscovered self-worth. That evening, standing in her gallery's doorway, she watched the sun setting across Manhattan's skyline. A painting by a young street artist behind her glowed in the final rays of light, an abstract swirl of bold colors that exuded hope. She thought of the naive girl who once arrived in the city chasing a dream, only to find it twisted by illusions. Now, she felt the surge of confidence in forging a dream shaped by her own choices. Stepping forward, she locked up for the night, tucking the keys into her purse with renewed purpose. The memory of Jonathan and Miranda's betrayal would always ache, but it had also catalyzed her transformation. Tomorrow, she would face the world again, stronger, wiser, and fiercely determined to craft a future built on honesty, artistry, and self-love. Betrayal often strikes when least expected, and few pains run deeper than a spouse's infidelity with a trusted friend. For Rachel Thompson, that discovery shattered her illusions, but it also awakened a strength she never knew she possessed. Step by trembling step, she confronted heartbreak, cast off the lies that bound her, and emerged with a renewed sense of self. No longer defined by her husband's affluence or a friend's deceit, Rachel found the power to reshape her destiny, forging a life where her passion and dignity shone brighter than any scandal could eclipse. If you were moved by Rachel's raw, unfiltered journey from anguish to empowerment, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you stories of real, unflinching emotion tales that remind us even the gravest betrayals can ignite the flames of renewal. Thank you for watching, and may you find hope in every challenge that comes your way.
While his pregnant wife cried at home. The millionaire posted vacation. Pics with his mistress. Then came the audit. They say that beneath every polished photograph lies a truth we dare not expose. Meet Mark Rutherford, a millionaire who appeared to have it all, a sprawling empire, gleaming sports cars and high society connections from New York to Monaco. His social media profiles flaunted sun-kissed getaways with an alluring woman at his side, but the world didn't know the tears he left behind. At home, Mark's pregnant wife, Angela, anxiously awaited his return, watching in despair as he posted glamorous vacation photos with his secret mistress. Little did he realize that a brutal audit loomed on the horizon, poised to shatter his perfect facade. At first glance, the life of Mark Rutherford looked like a fairy tale. Hailing from a modest neighborhood in upstate New York, Mark had ascended the social and financial ladder at breathtaking speed. He had rebranded himself into a savvy businessman who moved effortlessly in circles filled with CEOs, philanthropists and venture capitalists from Manhattan. Guests at his lavish parties would whisper about Mark's meteoric rise, debating whether his success was the product of ruthless cunning, uncanny luck, or possibly both. His wife, Angela Rutherford, had grown up in an entirely different environment, sunlit farmland just outside Buffalo, A, kind and gentle soul. Angela had fallen for Mark's charm when they were young. In those early years, he possessed a rare combination of drive and tenderness. She could still recall the day he proposed an intimate picnic near a serene lake where he vowed to cherish her forever. Although the lake was hardly a glamorous setting, The genuine emotion in Mark's eyes made every breeze and sunbeam feel like divine blessings upon their union. Their first few years of marriage were marked by humble dreams and long conversations about building a stable future. Angela had a warm smile and an unyielding belief in Mark's potential. She supported him when he launched his first company, a small tech startup, funded by meager savings and the generosity of a few distant relatives. She listened patiently to his late-night brainstorming sessions and scribbled business plans on napkins. She believed wholeheartedly in the man who had once promised her that no matter how high he soared, he would never leave her side. But success, as it often does, transformed Mark. The better the company did, the more Mark's life became a whirlwind of red carpet galas, midnight phone calls with overseas clients, and secretive deals that always seemed to happen behind closed doors. Angela initially chalked it up to the demands of business. He was forging connections, building a network, ensuring they would never again fret about money. But as Mark's taste for luxury intensified, so did the gap between them. No longer content with a quiet dinner at home, he began to crave expensive restaurants, dinners with powerful executives, and weekends aboard yachts docked in exclusive marinas. During this swift transition from middle-class comfort to extravagant wealth, Angela sometimes felt like a relic of Mark's past. She struggled to navigate the new social circles he so eagerly embraced. It wasn't that Angela lacked sophistication, she simply had a different set of values. Surrounded by glitzy soirees and endless champagne flutes, Angela found herself quietly pining for their old lives, where a single bouquet of daisies and an evening stroll could ignite her spirit more than any five-star event. When Angela discovered she was pregnant, she hoped it might rekindle the warmth and closeness they once shared. She dreamed of Mark's strong arms wrapped around her, whispering excited plans for a nursery. Yet from the very first conversation, she sensed his excitement was tainted. Instead of wholeheartedly celebrating her news, he mumbled something about how a baby might complicate ongoing deals. She tried to reassure him that they would navigate parenthood just like any other challenge, united by love and commitment. But the more her belly grew, the more Mark seemed to drift. Business expansions, urgent calls from Hong Kong, clandestine texts that he refused to show her. These all took precedence. Angela, in the softness of her heart, convinced herself that Mark was merely stressed. He was under intense pressure, or so he said. If anything, it was a testament to how dedicated he was to providing a secure life for their future child. She held on to that thought like a lifeline, refusing to consider more troubling possibilities. Meanwhile, Mark privately relished his newfound status among the mega-rich. He had formed partnerships with influential names. One such person was Richard Caldwell, a private equity mogul known for his hush-hush real estate acquisitions from Manhattan to Los Angeles. Caldwell quickly became more than just a business contact. He was also Mark's mentor in the art of living lavishly, constantly reminding him, wealth is not just about what you own. It's about how you display it. Between the constant swirl of business negotiations and late-night private gatherings at Caldwell's penthouse, Mark found himself on a slippery slope of moral compromises. It wasn't just about ignoring Angela. He was now drawn to a lifestyle where excess blurred ethical lines, and where loyalty even to one spouse became just another disposable commodity. In the back of his mind, Mark rationalized everything. He was simply seizing opportunities that his younger self could only dream about. After all, once the dust settled, he'd settle down. He promised himself he would eventually focus on family life. Among the wave of new faces entering Mark's life was Cassie Delgado, a striking woman with flowing auburn hair who exuded confidence and ambition. She first appeared on the scene as a marketing consultant recommended by one of Mark's investors. Their initial meeting took place in a sleek Manhattan boardroom, and Cassie left a powerful impression. She had a knack for reading a room, understanding its power dynamics, and adjusting her tone to sway the conversation in her favor. Mark watched, half amazed and half envious, as she negotiated cutting-edge promotional deals with an ease and flair that rivaled his own. She was more than an adept negotiator. Her presence was magnetic. Cassie was the kind of woman who seemed to invite confessions and temptations, her laughter hinting at secrets waiting to be uncovered. When Mark discovered she came from a modest background much like his, he felt an immediate sense of kinship. She too had clawed her way up from near obscurity. They bonded over shared stories of once living paycheck to paycheck, mocking the condescending attitudes they endured from privileged elites. And yet, while Angela's gentle innocence had once captivated Mark, Cassie's fierceness both inspired and intimidated him. On the surface, they formed a natural professional alliance, two driven personalities with matching hunger for wealth and influence. Beneath that veneer, however, a different chemistry was building. Mutual admiration soon morphed into flirtatious texts, then secret coffee dates under the guise of client meetings. Cassie was shrewd enough to know exactly what she wanted. She was not a naive romantic easily carried away by Mark's charms. She calculated every advantage that could be gained from their liaison. Whenever Mark talked about his personal life, Cassie would gently place a hand on his shoulder, tilt her head with empathy, and convince him that she alone understood his pressures. At first, it was subtle comfort during stressful work situations. But as time wore on, those stolen moments felt like portals to an alternate reality, where Mark wasn't obligated to be the doting husband or expectant father. He was free to indulge in Cassie's wiles, free to forget that Angela existed at home, softly crying herself to sleep. Each clandestine meeting fueled an adrenaline rush, unlike anything Mark had felt before. One evening, Cassie invited him to a high-end fashion show, after party, an event teeming with celebrities and socialites. Mark reasoned it was good for networking, so he attended in the dimly lit VIP lounge amid pulsing music and expensive champagne. Mark kissed Cassie for the first time. Angela was thousands of miles away in Buffalo for a prenatal checkup, but even if she had been in the same city, Mark doubted the outcome would have changed. Cassie was intoxicating. For a while, their affair was their best-kept secret. Mark rationalized that no real harm was done. He was merely satisfying a physical and emotional itch. Business thrived, and Mark promised himself that once the baby arrived, he would end it. He pictured a scenario in which he'd gracefully cut ties with Cassie, quietly return to Angela, and no one would ever know. But the more he tried to imagine an exit strategy, the deeper he sank into Cassie's enticements. Before long, Cassie began to sense Mark's warring guilt. She was nobody's fool. She noticed the anxious tone in his voice after each rendezvous and spotted the wedding ring he rarely took off. Yet she never pushed for a more official status. She didn't need to. Her hold over him was strong enough, and she reaped benefits as his preferred consultant, winning her lucrative contracts. Unbeknownst to Mark, Cassie also had connections in other circles. She heard whispers of the IRS investigating not just Mark's businesses, but also Caldwell's. These tidbits floated around black tie galas and hush-hush dinners. She gleaned from passing remarks how Mark's deals sometimes skirted the edges of legality. It was all speculation, but she kept it stored in the back of her mind should she ever need an ace up her sleeve. Angela, meanwhile, was growing more anxious by the day. Mark's excuses for his long absences piled up crucial deals, hectic travel schedules, emergency client meetings at odd hours. At times, Angela tried to voice her concerns, but Mark always brushed them off with dismissive gestures, telling her not to stress herself out during the pregnancy. Each time she felt a nagging sense that something was deeply amiss, but she forced herself to believe Mark's explanations. After all, how could the father of her unborn child be unfaithful? He was the man who once sobbed tears of joy when she agreed to marry him. Yet on nights when the loneliness grew unbearable, Angela couldn't help scrolling through Mark's social media, analyzing every new post or tagged photo like a detective on the verge of an explosive revelation. She couldn't place it exactly, but she sensed that the radiant smile on Mark's face in those pictures wasn't the same one he reserved for her or once had. Something vital had changed. It was as if he had found a new source of excitement, leaving Angela feeling more invisible with each passing day. Angela had no idea that an even bigger betrayal was about to blow their world apart, that her husband's business partner was really a mistress, and neither Mark nor Cassie suspected that the glittering tapestry of their covert romance was about to be torn asunder by forces far beyond their control. After all, if there's one thing life teaches us, it's that no secret can stay hidden forever, and that a reckoning is inevitable when you've built your castle on shifting sand. At home, each day of Angela's pregnancy crawled by like a slow-moving storm cloud. She had hoped that her growing belly would be a beacon of joy for both her and Mark, proof that love could endure beyond the manic hustle of corporate life. Instead, she found herself more alone than ever. Friends suggested prenatal yoga, childbirth classes, or baby shower plans, but Angela found it hard to join in the celebrations. How could she rejoice when Mark seemed only half present? Angela's symptoms, morning sickness, mood swings, and constant fatigue were magnified by emotional distress. Nights brought panic attacks that left her trembling under the covers, her tears dampening the pillow. Where was the partner who had once held her tight, reminding her that everything would be okay? Where was the man who had promised to love her in sickness and in health? When she tried to reach out, the phone calls went unanswered or were hurriedly cut short. Mark's texts, once affectionate, devolved into bullet points of half-hearted excuses. He reassured her, big project in Hong Kong, investors in town, busy with conference calls, will be home soon. Angela yearned to believe these promises, but as the weeks went on, she could sense the widening gap. She sought solace in memories of happier times, the first months of their marriage, in a small but cozy apartment, the simple act of cooking dinner together, laughing at inside jokes no one else could understand. Now the mansion they called home felt like an empty museum, its gilded ornaments and plush furniture mocking her loneliness. The house staff, housekeeper, chef, and driver tried to care for Angela, but their presence only highlighted Mark's absence. One evening, determined to bring back a shred of normalcy, Angela arranged a special dinner, complete with soft candlelight and her favorite homemade lasagna. She spent hours meticulously preparing each ingredient, all in hopes that Mark would come home and remember the love they once shared. She waited, her heart pounding at each passing minute. Midnight came and went, and by 1 a.m, the lasagna was cold and her tears were hot on her cheeks. Mark never walked through the door. Days blurred together in a monotonous cycle of doctor's visits and heartbreak. Angela's obstetrician, Dr. Viola Bancroft, gently advised her to minimize stress, emphasizing how harmful chronic anxiety could be for both mother and baby. Angela tried. She practiced deep breathing exercises, wrote in a journal, and consulted with a pregnancy counselor. In private moments, she'd place her hand on her belly, speaking softly to the life growing within her. She promised her unborn child that no matter what, they would be loved. Even if Mark never returned to them in the way he once was, Angela resolved to be strong. But that resolve wavered whenever Angela spotted something suspicious online. Mark's social media, once a tame collection of business achievements and philanthropic engagements, had transformed into a gallery of exotic beaches, poolside cocktails and glamorous parties. And he wasn't alone in these photos. A beautiful red-haired woman, sometimes tagged as Cassie Delgado, appeared in the background, or sometimes right by Mark's side. The two looked far too comfortable, far too close. Angela tried to reason with herself that maybe it was innocent, a professional associate or a friend. Yet the intimacy in their smiles felt like a dagger in Angela's heart. She dared not question Mark about it directly. She feared the answers she might get, or worse, the way he might dismiss her concerns altogether. Still, the seed of suspicion grew fueled by late-night social media stalking and the silent agony of her intuition. Each time Angela tried to bring up Cassie's name, Mark would brush it off, repeating lines like, "She's a valuable consultant," or "We're finalizing a huge deal, stop worrying." Angela's internal turmoil escalated until one night she broke down completely. She found herself curled up on the floor of the master bedroom, phone clutched in her shaking hand, sobbing uncontrollably. The images of Mark's apparent happiness with this other woman tormented her. Her growing stomach only served as a painful reminder that while her body prepared for motherhood, Mark seemed to be living a carefree, childless existence. Amid her tears, Angela realized something she was witnessing. Mark's transformation into the kind of man he once despised, someone who put material success and fleeting pleasures above everything else, including loyalty and love. The questions piled up. Could she trust him anymore? Would he even want to be part of the baby's life? And what if these business trips were mere covers for wild vacations with Cassie? Quietly, Angela decided that if Mark refused to come home to her, she would seek the truth on her own terms. She began to imagine confronting him directly, to see his reaction, to see if he'd lie to her face. For Angela, the days of silent suffering might soon come to an end. But before she could fully plan her confrontation, fate began its own countdown. Forces were converging behind the scenes, angry investors, suspicious auditors, and the unstoppable momentum of gossip that swirled through the social circles Mark desperately tried to impress, unaware of the storm that lay ahead. Angela continued to cling to one fragile hope that Mark would redeem himself before it was too late. Beachfront villas, crystal blue waters, and indulgent spa treatments at world-class resorts. This was Mark's new normal whenever he traveled with Cassie. The pair found endless excuses to combine work trips with scenic getaways, posting tastefully curated snapshots on social media. In each photo, Mark radiated a carefree smile, as if the sum of his worries amounted to nothing more significant than choosing the next cocktail to sip. Cassie orchestrated every shot, understanding the power of optics. She took great care to capture Mark against a backdrop of towering palm trees, their fronds swaying above him like a king's canopy. In some photos, Cassie stood at the edge of the frame, an enigmatic figure sipping champagne. The images ignited social media buzz and gossip in their swanky circles. Who is that stunning redhead with Mark Rutherford? Is she his new business partner or something more? The speculation only added to the thrilling aura of their forbidden escapade. For Mark, the vacation pics served a dual purpose. First, they fed his ego. After years of hustling to get recognized by society's upper echelons, he relished every like, comment, and message praising his amazing life. Second, They were a form of self-deception. If he convinced the world he was happy, maybe he could stifle the nagging guilt in his conscience. Guilt about leaving Angela alone at home, pregnant and distraught. Of course, Mark conveniently never mentioned Angela in these posts, nor did he reveal the existence of an unborn child. He rationalized that it was a private matter, not suited for public consumption. When friends and acquaintances inquired about Angela, he'd respond with vague statements. "Oh, she's busy preparing for the baby," or "traveling isn't safe for her right now." He avoided deeper questions at all costs. The last thing he wanted was an unscripted interview on how his personal life was unraveling. Cassie, meanwhile, reveled in her rising social profile. She found herself tagged in photos by influencers and minor celebrities who recognized Mark's wealth and Cassie's clever marketing strategies. Doors to exclusive events opened, wider brunch invitations from industry heavyweights rolled in. Through all this, Cassie remained calculated. She encouraged Mark to spend more lavishly to cultivate a public image as a worldly magnate on the verge of major global deals. That meant private jets instead of first-class commercial flights, dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, and suites in the most luxurious hotels. Mark complied, though each charge made his accountants and financial managers increasingly anxious. None of this extravagance occurred without cost. Mark's fluid capital was tied up in high-risk ventures. Liquidity was tighter than appearances suggested. He juggled lines of credit and questionable transactions, leaning heavily on Caldwell's counsel. Caldwell, too, urged Mark to keep the momentum of success going. "Fake it till you make it" was essentially their unspoken mantra. As long as public perception remained, stellar deals would keep flowing, and the heavy interest rates and balloon payments could be pushed further into the future. But cracks in the glossy surface began to form. On a particular getaway in Fiji, Mark received a barrage of frantic texts from his CFO. Financial regulators were poking around. Some suspicious wire transfers were flagged. Panicked investors were demanding clarifications on how Mark's so-called expansions aligned with his sudden personal spending. Mark tried to brush it off, determined not to let anything ruin his beach holiday with Cassie. He reasoned that this was just a minor hiccup. Nothing a few well-placed phone calls and quick financial maneuvers couldn't fix. Cassie, ever attuned to the slightest shift in Mark's mood, pressed him for details. He only offered vague reassurances about routine audits and overzealous inspectors. This was the first time she witnessed a real worry flicker behind Mark's confident facade. Sensing the potential threat to her cushy arrangement, Cassie tried to downplay it, coaxing him back into the carefree zone. They snapped more radiant selfies on the shore, hoping to drown out reality with digital illusions. Unbeknownst to them, Angela was scrolling through these very pictures. At that moment, tears streaming down her cheeks as she recognized the hotel's name from a travel magazine. The woman in Mark's arms wasn't just a business partner. No professional consultant gazed at a client with such intimate adoration. Angela felt a sharp ache in her chest as she realized how little Mark cared about hiding his betrayal. The audacity of his posts was almost surreal. Desperation clawed at Angela's insides. Perhaps confronting him through a phone call where she could hear his voice break if he lied was her best shot at forcing the truth. Gathering her nerve, she dialed Mark's number. No answer. She tried again and again, only to be met with voicemail. Anger flared up in her, a rage she'd never felt before. This was no longer a series of unfortunate misunderstandings or too busy at work moments. This was blatant humiliation. In the background, the swirl of an IRS investigation was growing stronger. Anonymous tips and suspicious transaction reports had caught the attention of forensic accountants who were beginning to follow the money trail. The timing of Mark's lavish travels raised red flags. Why, they wondered, would a businessman under such financial scrutiny broadcast opulent holidays across social media? Didn't he realize that auditors often examine lifestyle displays as part of their case? For Mark, ignorance felt like bliss. The more pictures he posted, the less real his looming problem seemed. Yet reality was closing in fast. The golden sand and azure waves might have served as a temporary stage for his fabricated paradise, but the tides were about to shift, and when they did, they'd wash away more than just footprints in the sand. While Mark and Cassie soaked in, the Fiji Sun agents at the Internal Revenue Service's Manhattan branch started piecing together fragments of an intricate puzzle. Spearheading the investigation was a meticulous auditor named Mallory Finch, reputed for her tenacity and keen ability to spot inconsistencies in vast financial records. Mallory had received a discreet tip about Mark Rutherford's questionable income streams, and once she opened his file, she discovered an alarming mismatch between his reported earnings and the lifestyle he flaunted. Mallory was never one to jump to conclusions, but the more she dug, the more anomalies she found. A sudden influx of capital, suspiciously timed with Mark's social media updates of private jet getaways, a pattern of shell companies popping up in multiple states, then vanishing without clear financial statements, offshore accounts vaguely tied to Mark's business, some of which contained substantial deposits from individuals flagged for previous tax evasion. These pieces raised her eyebrows, and Mallory suspected this investigation could balloon into something far larger than a mere tax discrepancy. Her next step involved contacting individuals who might share insights on Mark's dealings. One name that kept surfacing was Richard Caldwell, the private equity mogul rumored to have a hand in Mark's expansions. Caldwell himself was already under IRS scrutiny for unrelated properties in Florida and the Carolinas. If Caldwell and Mark were pooling resources in some illicit scheme, it could spell big headlines. Mallory prepared requests for bank statements, wire transfers, credit card expenditures, anything that would illustrate the true scope of Mark's financial empire. At the same time, Mark's CFO, Brian Cummings, was drowning in chaos. As soon as he noticed the heightened interest from regulatory authorities, Brian tried to warn Mark, but each call went unanswered, each email unreturned. Panic thrummed in Brian's chest. The entire finance department was on edge, especially after receiving official requests from the IRS for detailed financial records. Paper trails that Mark had insisted be handled discreetly were now fair game. If Mark didn't address these issues promptly, the meltdown would be inevitable. Behind the scenes, Caldwell played it cool. In public, he would toast Mark as a brilliant entrepreneur and encourage him to keep up appearances. In private, Caldwell had already started distancing himself, transferring assets and instructing his own legal team to prepare for inquiries. If the walls caved in, Caldwell intended to emerge with minimal damage, leaving Mark to shoulder the brunt of the consequences. Word of the looming audit spread quietly through Manhattan's financial circles. Bankers and lawyers connected to Mark had hushed luncheons, speculating about the magnitude of his troubles. Some predicted he'd face a heavy fine at best, or a full-scale criminal investigation. At worst, a few even took delight in the prospect of Mark's downfall, viewing it as an inevitable collapse for a man who rose too fast, spent too freely, and believed himself untouchable. Meanwhile, Angela was oblivious to the complexities of Mark's finances. Her world was confined to heartbreak and concern over her unborn child. She knew Mark must be in trouble. The abrupt changes in his behavior, the money he threw around so casually, the hush-hush deals he once mentioned but refused to elaborate upon. Yet she couldn't fathom the depth of the scandal brewing. Each day her anxiety deepened, a feeling that something catastrophic was hovering just out of sight. It all came to a head when Angela received a strange phone call from one of Mark's junior associates, a woman named Kara Hoffman. Although Kara didn't divulge specifics, she sounded panicked. "Angela, I don't know if you're aware, but there are investigations going on. Things look bad." Angela's heart pounded in her ears as Kara's words spilled over the line. "We're being asked for documents, receipts. I think Mark's in serious trouble. And look, this might not be my place, but I think you should know Mark's not who he used to be." Angela thanked Kara, her mind spiraling with questions. What exactly were they investigating? Had Mark committed fraud? Was he actually bankrupt and hiding the truth? The uncertainties gnawed at her. She ended the call feeling more determined than ever to confront Mark. She realized that her heartbreak over his possible affair was only one part of a bigger, uglier picture. If he was entangled in financial crimes, her unborn child's future would be at stake too. In Fiji, Mark was irritated to see a slew of missed calls from Brian and a cryptic text from Caldwell. "We need to talk ASAP." He tried to keep his calm exterior, but Cassie noticed the worry lines etched across his brow. Over an expensive bottle of wine at a cliffside restaurant, Mark finally admitted to her that the IRS might be launching a routine audit, but insisted it was nothing major. Cassie, who had heard different rumors from her insider network, suspected it was more serious than Mark let on. Yet she feigned reassurance, drawing Mark into a languid embrace. They'd handle it together, she cooed. They were unstoppable when united. That night, however, Cassie stepped outside onto the moonlit beach and placed a phone call to one of her closest confidants, an attorney who specialized in corporate law. Just in case she wanted to know her rights and potential liabilities, if Mark went down, Cassie had no intention of going down with him. Far away from that tranquil beach, Mallory Finch and her team worked late hours, scanning through reams of documents. Something big was surfacing, a web of shell companies, unaccounted funds, and potential tax evasion, so blatant it nearly dared the authorities to react. As she compiled her findings, Mallory sensed a storm about to erupt. The wealthy always believed they could outrun the law, but in her experience, hubris was their undoing. She gave a final glance at Mark's social media feed, scoffing at the gall of a man who flaunted paradise while standing at the brink of a scandal. Angela stood at the top of the grand staircase, the late afternoon sun illuminating her pregnant silhouette as she awaited Mark's return. She had summoned every last shred of courage to do what she should have done weeks ago, demand answers face to face. The house staff, sensing the tension, made themselves scarce. Rarely did Angela request the entire household's presence be minimal, but now she needed privacy. She needed space to unleash her anguish without an audience. Finally, Mark entered, dragging a suitcase behind him. He looked exhausted, yet still wore that forced confidence he had perfected in boardrooms. Angela's throat constricted at the sight of him. This was the man she'd once adored, now nearly a stranger. "We need to talk," she said, her voice trembling with suppressed anger and hurt. Mark's immediate instinct was to deflect Angela. "I've just come off a long flight. Can we do this later?" He began massaging his temples dramatically, but Angela stood firm, crossing her arms protectively over her belly. "No, now." A tense silence fell between them in the marble-floored foyer. Angela had rehearsed this confrontation dozens of times in her head, but the actual moment felt surreal. She started with the obvious, his social media posts. She demanded to know who the woman was, whether Cassie Delgado was truly just a consultant. Mark tried to dismiss it, as exaggerated rumors describing Cassie as a business partner who happened to be a close friend. Yet Angela's tears and fury dissolved any illusions. She raged at him for abandoning her during the pregnancy, for flaunting a lavish lifestyle, while she dealt with swollen ankles, hormonal surges, and sleepless nights alone. Her voice rose with each accusation. She brandished printouts of Mark's social media pictures, her hands shaking violently. "You think I'm stupid? Look at how she stares at you in these pictures." Her tears glimmered in the light, but her voice stayed sharp, revealing a hidden steeliness that Mark was unprepared for. Cornered Mark tried to justify himself. He mumbled about stressful deals and complicated emotions, as though that gave him a license to betray her. Sometimes, I feel trapped. Our life, it got so big, so fast. I never wanted to hurt you." But Angela's eyes, filled with betrayal, told him that any excuse would be hollow. Then came the topic Mark dreaded most: the IRS investigation. Angela slammed a folder onto a nearby coffee table containing the messages and notices she had intercepted from Mark's CFO and legal team. "I'm not a fool, Mark. What's going on with our finances? Are we in danger?" Her voice cracked, revealing not just anger, but a profound fear for the baby's future. Mark went pale. Faced with no way out, Mark finally admitted pieces of the truth: that the IRS was scrutinizing his accounts and that Caldwell was under investigation. He glossed over the details, claiming it was merely a routine check, but Angela knew better. She told him about the phone call from Kara Hoffman, the anxiety in the finance department, the hush-hush rumors swirling in business circles. Mark's casual dismissal of the audit set her on edge. She could see the worry etched in his eyes, belying his false assurances. In that painful moment, Angela realized they were standing on the precipice of something far larger than infidelity. They were at risk of losing their home, their reputations, possibly even their freedom if Mark's dealings were truly illegal. A swirl of confusion overtook her. How could the man she loved, who once saved every penny to buy her a modest engagement ring, have drifted so far into moral bankruptcy, summoning what strength she had? Left, Angela delivered an ultimatum. Either you end this affair, cooperate fully with the investigation, and prove you can be a father, or I'll leave. I won't stand by and let you drag me and our child down with you. Her tone was firm, a quiet declaration that shattered Mark's self-serving illusions. For the first time, he saw in Angela a strength more formidable than he had ever imagined. He stuttered, pleading with her to let him make it. Right, insisting that Cassie meant nothing, that he'd handle the IRS. But Angela stared at him, tears still streaming. She gave him one last chance, an opportunity to come clean and choose family over his addictive chase for wealth and excitement. Mark stood there, drenched in shame and uncertainty, uncertain if he could muster the courage to confront the monstrous problems he himself had created. The moment Mark set foot in his corner office. The next day, he felt the tension in the air so thick it could be cut with a knife. Several of his junior associates were huddled in the hallway, whispering among themselves. His CFO, Brian Cummings, appeared frazzled eyes, lined with dark circles from working through the night. A handful of boxes, filled with financial documents, stood stacked against the walls, evidence that the office had been combed through thoroughly. No sooner had Mark taken a seat behind his expansive mahogany desk than Mallory Finch, the lead auditor from the IRS, entered the room. She introduced herself politely, but her demeanor carried the authority of someone who had already unearthed serious irregularities. Mark tried to maintain his usual cool composure, but Mallory's questions were pointed. We'll need full access to your ledgers, bank statements, and any documentation related to your offshore accounts, she stated, her voice calm yet unyielding. One by one, Mark's staff delivered files to Mallory and her audit team. The entire office felt like a crime scene, with accountants and lawyers picking through every line item, every receipt and every contract. Mark attempted to project an air of cooperation, hoping that by acting transparent, he might reduce suspicion. Yet behind the facade, panic flared in his chest with each document he signed over. Over the following days, Mallory's team uncovered evidence of large sums of money flowing through shell corporations. Whenever Mark tried to feign ignorance, Mallory presented him with email correspondences or suspicious wire transfer confirmations bearing his digital signature. In meeting after meeting, Mark struggled to explain the labyrinthine structure of his business dealings. He found himself stumbling over the complexities, some of which Caldwell had orchestrated. Meanwhile, Caldwell was conspicuously absent. Phone calls to him went straight to voicemail, and cryptic text messages offered no real support. Mark finally reached Caldwell's lawyer, only to be informed that Caldwell was unavailable and that Mark should speak to his own legal counsel. Though Mark's official stance remained that he and Caldwell were partners, Caldwell had begun insulating himself from the fallout. Cassie, too, seemed suddenly distant. She had been helpful before, but once the audit gained momentum, she avoided dropping by the office or appearing with Mark publicly. She insisted it was best to keep a low profile until the situation blew over. Privately, Cassie was assessing whether Mark was worth sticking around for, or if she should jump ship to protect her burgeoning career. The glow of their sun-drenched vacations felt like a lifetime ago. Now every conversation crackled with tension. Amid the chaos, Angela received a flurry of calls from Mark's lawyers, advising her to limit any public statements or social media posts that might affect the ongoing investigation. Though she had no intention of speaking publicly, she understood the subtext. They feared she might vent her frustrations, potentially exposing more of Mark's secrets. She responded politely, but remained on guard, reluctant to trust anyone paid by Mark's questionable fortunes. But for Angela, the real challenge was emotional. She felt paralyzed, uncertain whether to believe Mark's repeated assertions that he was handling it. With each day, her baby grew inside her, a silent testament to the gravity of the life choices swirling around her. She was torn between anger, heartbreak, and the faint hope that Mark could somehow rectify the damage he'd wrought. As the audit wore on, Mark's worst fears materialized. His personal finances, those he had guarded most fiercely, were now under scrutiny. Mallory's team discovered that some of his lavish personal expenses were siphoned directly from corporate accounts. Worse, there was evidence of tax fraud, with Mark claiming deductions for luxury trips that in reality had nothing to do with legitimate business. It was the perfect storm for a case that could escalate beyond simple fines into criminal charges. In a tense meeting late one evening, Mark's legal counsel laid everything on the table. If you don't fully cooperate and provide any remaining documents, the IRS may pursue charges. You could face prison time, Mark reeled. Jail had never been part of his wildest calculations. He had assumed that being wealthy and well-connected would insulate him from serious legal consequences. Now that protective veil was disintegrating, needing a lifeline. Mark attempted to reach out to Caldwell one last time. To his shock, Caldwell's phone was answered by a cold, automated voice announcing the number had been disconnected. A follow-up call to Caldwell's office revealed that the mogul was allegedly overseas for an extended period. Mark cursed under his breath, realizing he had been left to fend for himself in a lion's den. The man who had once toasted to their partnership was now vanishing like smoke. That night, Mark sat alone in his office, the city lights glimmering through floor-to-ceiling windows, reflecting off the scattered paperwork that spelled doom for his financial empire. He considered calling Cassie to vent or beg for comfort, but the prospect of another hollow reassurance made his stomach churn. As he stared at the final remnants of his once grandiose aspirations, a pang of regret rattled him. He had traded his wife's love and his family's future for fleeting thrills and illusions of grandeur. Now the audit threatened to expose every lie he'd told to Angela, to the world, and most damningly to himself. In the days that followed, the audit expanded, touching not only Mark's direct holdings, but also affiliated partnerships. News leaked, leading to sensational headlines. Millionaire entrepreneur under IRS probe, high-flying lifestyle meets harsh reality, and partner of Richard Caldwell, questioned in major tax evasion case. Journalists began digging into Mark's background, painting him as the poster child for new money gone awry. Every flashy social media post he'd made with Cassie became tabloid fodder. The images relabeled as evidence of possible embezzlement. His office phone rang incessantly with calls from investors, business associates, and even distant relatives who wanted their slice of the truth or an explanation of how he'd tarnished the family name. Mark's PR team scrambled to contain the fallout-spinning statements about how he was fully cooperating with authorities. But the tone was grim, and the public consensus leaned toward condemnation. People love a success story, but they find an equal or perhaps greater thrill in watching a figure stumble, especially one who had reveled in ostentatious displays of wealth. Cassie Delgado, once an ever-present source of excitement, showed up unannounced at Mark's office one evening. Her eyes darted nervously around the reception area, where agents and lawyers were busily poring over boxes of files. She slipped into Mark's private suite, shutting the door behind her with a soft click. Mark, physically and emotionally drained, looked up surprised and guarded. She spoke in a hushed tone, a tremor in her voice, betraying the panic beneath her practiced composure. "Mark, this is getting out of hand. The IRS could start looking into every transaction I handled for you. My name is on some of those marketing contracts. If they think I'm part of this..." She left the threat unspoken. Mark stared at her, half annoyed, half sympathetic. He realized she had never planned to be caught in a legal quagmire. Her loyalty was as transactional as any of his offshore ventures. In a bid to reassure her, Mark promised that her name would remain clear, insisting she hadn't knowingly committed any crimes. She demanded to see documents, emails, receipts, anything to confirm she wouldn't be implicated. Reluctantly, Mark allowed her a glimpse into some sanitized versions of his accounts. Yet the tension between them was palpable. The illusions of a carefree relationship disintegrated under the weight of potential indictments. Cassie left the office with no promise of a future rendezvous. Meanwhile, Angela found herself navigating a different battleground. Mark's lawyers pressed her to sign documents that would shield certain assets under her name, presumably to separate them from Mark's precarious financial entanglements. Confused and wary, Angela enlisted a lawyer of her own. She wasn't about to let Mark's shady dealings ruin her credit or her standing, especially with a baby on the way. "Protect yourself," her lawyer advised. "You don't want to be tied to anything that could be seized if this goes south." At night, Angela wrestled with a storm of emotions. She was furious with Mark for placing her in such a precarious position, but also worried about the father of her child potentially facing prison. Her moral dilemma festered. Should she stand by him in hopes that he'd transform back into the man she once loved? Or should she cut ties, safeguarding herself and her baby from the inevitable destruction amid this maelstrom? Mark's friend-turned-mentor, Richard Caldwell, maintained an enigmatic distance. Whispers circulated that Caldwell had fled to a non-extradition country or was in the process of shifting assets to offshore havens. A single short letter from Caldwell's legal team arrived at Mark's office, disclaiming any responsibility for Mark's financial decisions. It stated, Caldwell was prepared to cooperate with authorities if he was subpoenaed. Mark felt a chill at the underlying threat Caldwell might cut a deal that implicated him in exchange for leniency. In desperation, Mark tried to salvage at least one partnership. He invited one of his key investors, Michael Evans, a man he once considered a friend, to dinner at an upscale restaurant. The objective was to reassure Evans that the business still had potential, that Mark's personal troubles wouldn't sink their joint ventures. But over the flicker of candlelight, Evans drummed his fingers on the table and coldly remarked, "I invested in your vision. Mark, not in your vanity. Now it seems all you cared about was flaunting money you didn't even have." The meal ended early with Evans walking away, refusing to share even a parting handshake. Humiliation sank heavily into Mark's gut doors that once opened for him. Private clubs, elite investment groups were swiftly closing. Rumors and half-truths spread. People who had lauded him for his risk-taking brilliance now labeled him reckless or even criminally negligent. Each day felt like a war of attrition on his spirit, culminating in the knowledge that he had orchestrated his own downfall. In a final desperate effort, Mark turned to Angela, swallowing his pride. He arrived at the mansion late one evening, drenched by a sudden rainstorm, and found her in the living room, reading pregnancy guides by the flickering fire. Collapsing to his knees beside her, Mark pleaded for her forgiveness, promising to set everything right. He vowed to cut ties with Cassie and even threatened legal action against Caldwell, swearing he would devote himself to her and their unborn child. If she would just stand by him through the audit, Angela listened with weary eyes. She wanted to believe him, yearned for the possibility of redemption. But trust is not an infinite resource. However profound her love might have been, it was battered and fragile now. "Mark," she whispered, voice trembling, "I need more than promises. I need a reason to believe you'll truly change for once." Mark had no clever comeback, no glib assurance. He simply held Angela's hands in his own, the silent tears mixing with the rainwater dripping from his hair. Yet in her mind, Angela couldn't shake the image of him, carefree on some exotic beach, while her tears stained the floors of an empty home. Whether he was truly remorseful or just desperate to avoid utter collapse, she couldn't quite discern. The inevitable moment came one crisp autumn morning. Mark received a summons detailing the IRS's intent to pursue charges of tax fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to evade taxes. Although formal indictments had not yet been filed, the document spelled out enough to shake Mark to his core. If convicted, he could face hefty fines and potentially years behind bars. News outlets pounced on the story, fueling public outrage over Mark's ostentatious lifestyle at the expense of unpaid taxes and possible illegal gains. Overnight, he became a pariah. The viral hashtag #RutherfordCoreReckoning trended across social media, accompanied by pictures from his once vaunted Instagram feed. Memes ridiculed him as a cautionary tale of greed and moral decay. As the IRS case progressed, Mark's lawyers advised him to seek a plea deal, something that might reduce jail time if he cooperated fully and revealed any co-conspirators. Mark balked at first. The mere idea of turning on Caldwell felt like a betrayal. But Caldwell had already disappeared from Mark's life, leaving a trail of plausible deniability. There was no loyalty to preserve anymore. In a tense meeting with his legal team, Mark agreed to provide detailed accounts of his transactions with Caldwell and the shady practices they had employed to mask income. It was a desperate act, akin to dragging others into the fire to lessen his own burns. Mark felt equal parts anger and shame. His once proud confidence had eroded, leaving behind a man grasping for any lifeline. Meanwhile, Angela watched from the sidelines, sickened and heartbroken. She was summoned as well, though primarily as a witness. Her name was on certain joint bank accounts. Her baby bump had grown. Each kick reminded her of the new life she was trying to protect. She prepared herself to testify, truthfully determined not to lie for Mark. If he had ever truly loved her, he wouldn't force her into the role of accomplice. Cassie Delgado, too, was called for questioning. While her official work for Mark's firm was deemed legitimate, investigators wanted to ensure she wasn't complicit in any financial crimes. Terrified of criminal charges, Cassie painted herself as merely an employee, someone who had no role in Mark's financial decisions. She cooperated, answering every question about Mark's whereabouts, his corporate spending, and how business expenses often appeared suspiciously personal in nature. With her personal involvement clarified, Cassie walked away unscathed, albeit her reputation irreparably tarnished. The final blow to Mark's empire came with a court-ordered freeze on many of his assets. His mansion went into foreclosure, luxury cars were repossessed, and his bank accounts were seized, pending further legal proceedings. One by one, employees in his companies were laid off, fueling bitter resentment from families who relied on those paychecks. Mark couldn't meet payroll or vendor obligations. He watched helplessly as everything he'd built, the offices, the brand, the illusions, crumbled. Angela made the difficult decision to move out of the mansion before the bank officially reclaimed it. She refused Mark's tearful requests to stay by his side, insisting they needed space to reflect. She settled temporarily in a modest apartment near her parents, choosing to focus on her well-being and the baby's imminent arrival. Her lawyer had successfully shielded her personal finances, ensuring she wouldn't be dragged into Mark's legal vortex. On the day Mark finally accepted the plea agreement, reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, cameras flashed. As he walked in, his hair unkempt, dark circles under his eyes. The same man who once strutted in designer suits now wore a resigned expression and an off-the-rack outfit. In front of a judge, he spoke words he never envisioned uttering. "I plead guilty, Your Honor." The plea involved cooperating with ongoing investigations into Caldwell's network, offering testimony regarding their underhanded financial schemes. Though prison time was nearly certain, it might be lessened due to his cooperation. Standing in that courtroom, Mark felt a nauseating swirl of regret. He flashed back to simpler times, when a faithful wife, a small apartment, and a dream for a better life had been enough. How far he had strayed. Walking out to a chorus of shouted questions from journalists, Mark said nothing. His lawyer shielded him, guiding him into a waiting car. As they pulled away, he glimpsed a billboard on a nearby building. It displayed a gleaming tropical scene, with a couple laughing on a beach, a seductive advertisement for holiday packages. He closed his eyes, remembering his social media posts with Cassie under exactly such a sun. The irony was as bitter as the metallic taste of fear and regret on his tongue. In the ensuing weeks, Mark prepared for sentencing. The judge would weigh his cooperation against the severity of his crimes. He resided in a small, barren apartment, a far cry from his former luxury. The silence at night was deafening, and sleep evaded him. He alternated between making calls to his remaining legal counsel and drafting letters of apology to employees, to business partners, and most painfully to Angela. While Mark grappled with his new reality, Angela focused on hers. She continued prenatal checkups, often accompanied by her supportive mother. Away from the oppressive gloom of Mark's downfall, Angela found moments of calm, even happiness. She set up a simple nursery in her parents' home, painting the walls a gentle shade of yellow. As she folded tiny baby clothes, she felt a blend of apprehension and resolve. The future was uncertain, but she would not let Mark's mistakes define her child's life. As Mark approached his sentencing date, he met again with Mallory Finch, the steadfast IRS auditor who had spearheaded the case. Despite her unwavering professionalism, Mallory sensed the tragic undertones of Mark's journey. She had encountered dozens of wealthy individuals who believed themselves untouchable, but Mark's downfall seemed particularly steep. When Mark thanked her, an odd moment of gratitude to the person who had effectively unraveled his life, Mallory simply responded, "I hope this leads you to a better path." On a chilly winter afternoon, Angela went into labor, surrounded by her mother, her sister, and a compassionate medical staff. She brought a healthy baby boy into the world. She named him Daniel, honoring her grandfather. As she held her son for the first time, tears rolled down her cheeks. This was a new beginning, fragile, beautiful, and untainted by the sins of the father. Mark, informed by letter, received the news in his prison cell. He felt a pang of both joy and sorrow, imagining the life he could have shared with them, if only he hadn't succumbed to greed and self-indulgence. Restricted by concrete walls and razor wire, he could only dream of a day he might hold his child. He resolved that if he ever got the chance, he would be a better man. This real-life drama story of grandiose wealth, crushing betrayal, and hard-earned redemption reminds us that no amount of luxury can outweigh the value of loyalty and honesty. Mark Rutherford's rise and fall echo a stark warning beneath every glittering facade. Lie choices that can shatter families and futures. If we allow greed to eclipse our moral compass, Angela's journey underlines the power of inner strength. By choosing integrity over complicity, she protected not just herself, but the next generation. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this gripping saga. If you found value or inspiration in Angela's resilience and learned from Mark's tragic lessons, please take a moment to like this video, share it with others who need a wake-up call, and subscribe to our channel. Together, we continue to explore life's most dramatic stories, reminding ourselves of the profound consequences of our actions and the resilience of the human spirit.